My name's Trevor. I'm 36 years old, and for the last 15 years, I've been quadriplegic. I want to tell you something before I go any further, though. Something that took me a long time to understand myself. The scariest night of my life wasn't the night of my accident. It wasn't the ambulance ride, or the surgeon telling my parents I might never breathe on my own again, or the year of rehab where I had to relearn how to hold a spoon. No, the scariest night of my life happened 2 years ago. In my own kitchen, in my own home, with my own wife standing over me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where this story actually begins. 15 years ago, I was 21, working construction in the summers to pay for college, invincible the way only 21-year-olds are. I was diving off a dock at a lake with some friends, a stupid ordinary 1,000 times before kind of jump, and I hit a sandbar I didn't know was there. I remember the impact more than the pain. I remember not being able to feel my legs before I even understood what that meant. I won't drag you through every detail of the year that followed, the surgeries, the ICU, the night nurse who held my hand when I cried because I couldn't stop the tears even though I couldn't feel my own face doing it. What matters is what came after. I decided, somewhere in that hospital bed, that I was not going to spend the rest of my life being pitied. I was going to build something. It took years, but I did. I finished my degree, I learned to drive using hand controls, I got a job in logistics management, the kind of work where my mind mattered more than my body, and I was good at it. I moved into my own apartment, I hired caregivers when I needed them, and fired the ones who treated me like a task instead of a person. By the time I was 30, I had a full life. Not a life despite my disability, just a life, mine. That's who I was when I met Emily. She was 28, whip smart, ambitious in a way that made you want to be around her just to catch some of that fire. She'd just started a small e-commerce business selling handmade home goods, working out of her apartment, packing boxes at midnight, answering customer emails before her day job even started. I fell for her within a month, not because she felt sorry for me. She never once looked at me like that, but because she talked to me like I was a whole person with something to offer, not a project. I want to be fair here, because this isn't a story about a villain. Before we got married, Emily did something a lot of partners never bother to do. She learned. She sat with my caregivers and asked questions. She learned how to help me transfer from my wheelchair to the bed, how to manage my catheter, how to recognize the early signs of autonomic dysreflexia, which can genuinely kill me if it's missed. She did all of this with her eyes open. Nobody tricked her. Nobody hid anything from her. She told me, more than once, I know what I'm signing up for, and for the first year, I believed her completely. We got married on a beach in Florida, my brother pushing my chair through soft sand because I insisted on being close to the water for the ceremony. Emily's whole family came. Her older sister Rachel cried through the vows. Rachel's husband Mark gave a toast that made even me tear up. It felt, for a long time, like I'd found the thing I wasn't sure I'd ever get to have. Emily's business grew faster than either of us expected. What started as her packing boxes alone became a real operation. Inventory, a small team, a delivery route into Miami twice a week using a used commercial van we'd bought together. I still worked my full-time job, but I gave her every spare hour I had. Nights, weekends, whatever she needed. I did the books, I coordinated with suppliers. Some weeks I put in 25, 30 hours on top of my day job. And I never once resented it, because I wanted her to win. I wanted to be the husband who showed up. Her family became part of our life in a real way. Rachel hosted Sunday dinners that turned into working sessions half the time. Everyone packing boxes at the dining table between bites of pot roast. Their cousin Claudia started helping with fulfillment. Another cousin, Kathy, would occasionally drive the van when Emily was slammed. It felt most days like a family running towards something together. I need you to understand that I'm telling you all of this because it's true, not because I'm building up to some fake, sappy contrast. Emily and I had something real. That's what makes what happened so hard to sit with, even now. There was one recurring source of friction, small and manageable at first. The van. It belonged to the business, technically, but Rachel would sometimes borrow it. She and Mark were in the middle of moving into a new house that year, and a cargo van beats a hatchback for hauling furniture. Emily didn't love lending it out during a delivery week, but she never said no to her sister. Rachel always brought it back. It was never a big deal. Until the Sunday it was an ordinary Sunday. That's the thing I keep coming back to. How ordinary it was, right up until it wasn't. We'd been at Rachel's house since early afternoon, prepping for Monday's Miami run. Boxes everywhere. Claudia labeling shipments. Kathy running numbers on the delivery manifest. Emily was stressed. She'd had a vendor issue that morning that put her behind. But nothing about the day felt dangerous. I remember laughing with Mark about a home renovation show. I remember reminding Emily gently, twice, that we still needed the van back at the warehouse before Monday morning because the driver was scheduled to leave at 6 a.m. Around 9 at night, Rachel mentioned she still had the van from the move and needed to drop it somewhere so Claudia could grab her own car, which was parked near the new house. It turned into one of those logistics puzzles families create for themselves. Kathy would drive the van halfway to meet Claudia, hand it off. And then Kathy and Rachel would need a ride the rest of the way home. Emily suggested they just call an Uber, reasonable enough. Except it was a Sunday night in a stretch of Florida where surge pricing turns a 15-minute ride into a $70 problem. And I was sitting right there with a working set of hand controls and nothing else to do. So I said I'd drive them. I want to be honest, I didn't think twice about it. This is the kind of thing I do. I hate watching people waste money when I can help. It wasn't about proving anything. It was Sunday night, I was tired but capable, and $70 is $70. I told Emily I'd swing by and pick her up after I dropped Rachel and Kathy home. She didn't stop me. She didn't say anything at all, actually, which I should have registered as a warning sign, and didn't. I drove Rachel and Kathy home. Normal conversation, nothing strange. I got Emily maybe 40 minutes later than planned. The drive back to our place was quiet, but Emily's quiet wasn't unusual after a long day, so I didn't push. The second we got through our front door, it stopped being quiet. She turned on me before I even had my chair positioned. Her voice wasn't just raised, it was shaking with something I hadn't heard from her before. She said I'd humiliated her in front of her whole family, that I'd made her look weak, like she couldn't manage her own household, her own sister, her own decisions, without her husband swooping in to be the hero. She said I did this constantly, took over, made myself the good guy, made her look small by comparison. I tried to stay calm. I told her I wasn't trying to undermine her, that I just didn't want Rachel and Kathy paying $70 when I was sitting right there. I told her I was sorry if it came across differently than I meant it. It didn't land, nothing I said landed. She told me I always did this, always had to be the peacemaker, always had to fix things, like I got some kind of satisfaction out of making everyone else look worse by comparison. She said she was done. She said the word divorce for the first time that night, and it came out so fast and so sharp that I actually went quiet because I didn't recognize the person saying it. Then she told me to leave. I tried to explain, as gently as I could, that leaving wasn't something I could just do. Our house had been modified specifically for me. Roll-in shower, lowered counters, a bed frame at the right height for transfers, grab bars in exact positions calculated by an occupational therapist. There was no hotel I could roll into at 10 at night and function safely. I had work in the morning. I asked her, "Please, let's talk about this like adults, not like this," she said, and I remember this exactly. "Then call someone else. I'm not doing this tonight." I didn't understand yet what this meant. I found out 15 minutes later, when it was time to get out of my chair and into bed, and Emily, who had learned this exact transfer, who had done it 1,000 times without complaint, who knew precisely what I needed, simply refused. She stood in the doorway of our bedroom and told me to figure it out myself. I called 2 backup caregivers. It was almost midnight on a Sunday. Neither one picked up. I sat there in my chair in the hallway, phone in my lap, and understood, really understood, for the first time in 15 years, that I was completely, entirely dependent on the one person in the house who had just decided she wasn't going to help me. I want to try to describe what that felt like, because I don't think most people can imagine it. It isn't just fear. It's a specific total kind of helplessness where your body becomes a countdown clock. I can't sit in my wheelchair indefinitely. Pressure sores can develop in hours, and for someone like me, an untreated one can turn into a hospitalization, or worse. My body needed to be off that cushion, and the only person who could safely move me had just told me I was on my own. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I wheeled myself into the kitchen, got as low as I could manage, and eased myself down onto the floor under the table, using a couch cushion I dragged over to soften the landing. I lay there on our kitchen floor in the dark, in my own home, next to a fridge covered in photos from our wedding. I need you to understand. It wasn't just the physical discomfort of a hard floor and a body that doesn't move the way it's supposed to. It was the humiliation. It was lying there thinking about every caregiver I'd ever fired for treating me like less than a person, and realizing the person doing that to me now was my wife. It was grief moving through me in waves for a version of my marriage I'd been sure I had. Emily came back into the kitchen around 1 a.m. She saw me on the floor, and instead of panic, instead of guilt, her first words were an accusation. That I was doing this on purpose, lying on the floor like that, trying to make her feel guilty, trying to manipulate her into looking like the villain. I didn't have the strength to argue. I quietly called my brother-in-law, Mark, and asked if I could stay with him and Rachel for the night. I was already planning how I'd manage the transfer with his help, when Emily's tone flipped entirely. Suddenly, she was begging me not to leave, telling me if I actually walked out, if I let her family see me leave like this. She'd file for divorce in the morning. Stay, and she's furious. Try to leave, and she's threatening the same outcome from the opposite direction. I sat there on that kitchen floor, completely trapped, and realized there was no version of that night where I got to make a decision that was actually mine. It took almost 3 more hours. 3 hours of me talking as calmly as I could manage, exhausted, in pain, humiliated, before Emily finally agreed to help me into bed. The physical crisis ended around 4 a.m, but something else had started that night, something that didn't end when I finally closed my eyes. The days after, Emily acted almost like nothing had happened. She made coffee, she kissed my forehead before work. She didn't bring up the kitchen floor, and honestly, at first neither did I. I told myself it was a one-time collapse, a stressed, overworked woman who snapped under pressure and would never do something like that again. But once you see something like that clearly, you can't stop seeing it. I started remembering things I'd filed away without examining, the way her face would tighten, just for a second, when she had to help clean up an accident I couldn't control, the sighs she'd let out, quiet, almost inaudible, while changing my catheter like it was an inconvenience rather than a fact of loving someone with a body like mine. I'd noticed these things before. I'd just decided, every time, that stress was the real explanation, and that naming it out loud would only make things worse between us. I started paying attention to a pattern I'd somehow never fully mapped out. In Emily's family, I was always the one who smoothed things over. When she and Rachel fought over wedding planning, I was the one who called Rachel and found a compromise. When her mother said something that hurt her, I was the one who talked Emily through it instead of feeding the anger. I genuinely didn't mind being that person. I like understanding people. I like finding the version of a conflict where everyone gets to keep their dignity. But I started noticing that Emily never returned that effort. In her mind, there was a right way to see things, her way. And anyone who saw it differently wasn't offering a perspective, they were being disloyal. I brought up therapy, gently, more than once. I told her I thought we both had things worth working through. Her stress, my own fear of being a burden, the pressure of running a growing business on top of caregiving. She refused every time, sometimes with anger, sometimes by simply changing the subject so smoothly, I didn't realize until later that she'd dodged it entirely. Individual therapy, couples counseling, even a single conversation with a mediator, all off the table. I kept asking myself the same question, over and over, in the quiet hours after she'd fallen asleep. Did Emily still love me, or had she come to resent the responsibility of loving me? I don't think the answer is as simple as either option. I think, honestly, both things can be true in the same person at the same time. I think she loved me and also, some nights, hated what loving me required of her. I think that contradiction is what made that night in the kitchen possible. Not cruelty exactly, but exhaustion curdling into something that looked like cruelty when it mattered most. That's what makes this so hard to talk about. She's not a monster. I've seen her be tender with me in ways that still make my chest ache to remember. But I've also felt, on my own kitchen floor at 1 a.m, what it means to depend completely on someone who might, on the wrong night, decide not to show up. We're still married. I want to be honest about that too. This isn't a story with a clean ending. I've started looking into hiring a full-time professional caregiver, someone whose job it is to help me, someone whose presence in our home wouldn't hinge on whether Emily and I had a good day or a bad one. Part of me hopes that might save us, take the caregiving weight off her shoulders, so what's left between us can just be a marriage again, instead of a job she resents. But another part of me, the part that lay on that kitchen floor in the dark, knows that trust doesn't rebuild itself just because the danger gets managed. I used to think the worst thing that could ever happen to me already had. 15 years ago, on a lake I can't swim in anymore. I don't think that's true anymore. The worst thing that can happen to me is being loved by someone who, when she's angry enough, forgets I'm a person and remembers only that I'm a burden. I don't know yet if Emily and I survive this. I don't know if any amount of hired help fixes a wound like that. What I do know is that I'll never again mistake someone learning how to care for me with someone who will always choose to. That's the risk nobody warns you about when you fall in love after a spinal cord injury. It's not whether someone will learn to help you, it's whether they'll keep choosing to on the nights it costs them something.